Bushman Program 5, Dynamics. Mama kuche kwa kuche kwa ho ma ye de yo ya ku ya ta ti ai kai mama di
These, at Zodillo Hills, the slippery hills, lost in the vastness of the Kalahari Desert, were known only to the Bushmen for thousands of years. And I believe that when I saw them myself, nearly 30 years ago, I was the first European to look at them and to explore them thoroughly. These paintings draw one's attention immediately to the fact that this particular hill was more than just a mere hill for the Bushmen. We know that hills in the history of human beings and mountains have always been symbols and images of what still has to be achieved by man, of what is still to be earned and to be worked for, and represents, finally, what is beyond a man and is here and now. It is not therefore surprising to come here in the Kalahari Desert, where there are no hills, to a place where the rule is proved by a monumental exception, that there is a hill which should have come to represent what is divine to the people who knew about them.
Of course, there are all sorts of stories today about how these hills came to be divine and in what particular sense they represent a power which is beyond man. And I can't possibly tell all these stories because almost every Bushman group which comes to these hills has its own version. I can only speak about the version given to me by a witch doctor 28 years ago, and which made me determined, as it were, to make a pilgrimage to these hills as well. And according to this witch doctor, the spirit which created everything came and did the work of creation from the top of these hills. And he told me that when you come to these hills, and they will look so solid to you, you must realize that behind these stones, inside, these hills are like a very large house, full of different rooms. And in every room there will be the master spirit, say of the Kudu, say of the Bushmen, say of the Makobo, of the Bushmen, of the spirit which controlled the life of those people on earth.
All the many implications of this kind of spirit were endlessly discussed in that unique Bushman language which expresses almost everything in terms of feeling. For instance, the Bushman would say, the sun feels itself to be sitting in the sky, and feeling itself to be hot enables people on earth to feel themselves to be hot as well. And the first literature of Africa is in the spoken stories and legends of the Bushmen. We stand like pygmies always, we who write and those who read us and listen to us stand like pygmies always on the shoulders of a great giant of spoken literature. The purest and the best documented Bushman stories evolved around the personality almost of an insect called the praying mantis. Now, mantis is, of course, a word derived from the Greek, and it is a word, moreover, which implies a capacity for seeing beyond the here and the now. And there are many explanations of why the Bushmen picked on mantis above all of the great and the powerful and grand animals and birds of Africa to be their intermediary between earth and heaven. Mantis, for all who know him, is charged with a sense of mystery, a sense of paradox. He sums up in Bushman imagination the importance of the small, of the infinite in the small. Now, the Bushmen say that the works of Mantis were many. There is one story which moves me more than most. It is a story that tells how Mantis made the animal he loved so much, the eland, out of a sandal, which had been discarded by a character called Kwamanga, who's an element in the rainbow, which is a symbol of man's conscious self. He dipped this rejected sandal into a pool of water where there were rushes and where the birds sang. As one finds in all mythologies, that man creates best out of rejected aspects of himself. And when Mantis had made this eland, and it was at last fully grown and could walk on its own, when Mantis's back was turned, Mantis's children, his conscious self, Kwamanga, and all the others combined, and they killed the eland. And Mantis was supremely upset, not because they'd killed the eland, because he understood why they needed the food of the eland. Eating for the Bushmen was not just eating in the sense that we eat today. It was a kind of communion, because they believed that as you ate the eland, so you participated of the aspect of the eland, which was divine. And what had upset Mantis so much was that he himself had not been allowed to take part in this kind of eating. He was like a Moses who could lead others to the promised land, the promised food of renewal, but not allowed to enter and partake of it himself. So Mantis had a moment of great bitterness, which is symbolically represented by an argument which he has with the gall of the eland. And in the end he pierces the gall to try and get rid of it. But the gall explodes and covers him all over with blackness, so that he can't see. And not knowing what to do, blinded with bitterness, he casts about until he finds a feather. And this feather is most important, because it is the feather of the ostrich, the bird which gave Mantis fire, which is consciousness. And he wipes the bitterness from his eye with this enlarged consciousness through suffering. And he throws this feather up into the sky, and he says to the feather, "Henceforth you shall be the moon. You shall shine at night in the sky, so that the men who have gone out hunting and got lost by day shall have a light to show them the way home in the darkness to come." And the days after nights of storytelling into the early hours of the morning, the Bushmen would have to prepare for one or more of their great dances. And in these dances it was essential for the ultimate effect that the men wore rattles round their ankles. And these rattles were made out of crushed ostrich eggshells that were enclosed in dry and hollow cocoons.
Cậu nằm là cậu. Có cha ngọc rồi. Taha chikam amu chi. Cha abo kana sikima mikia tu abo kana sikima. Chi ha o ha tumi ha kwa ha. Ibi cha pe ya khot an. Oi, chiba kwa ku ibi ya. Kana an to be kwa. Ham di khot cha ka nga. Kha cha di khot cha ba ti bi an to ka ya ni cha ka ko ya. Ibi tu ya cha be avec avec mo ko da an. Oh, ha cha kwa. Ai chỉ mà tí hồi gì thằng coi chơi kìa hết mà chỉ ở trên sàn cái thằng cái thằng tôi toa cái gì tôi phải bắt cái khối không còn cuối cùng thì khối ai có chỗ này nu ba ta tu cái món cái ai của bà chú ai cái con con ma cái con ma cái 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 hai đi à đấy có hai đi à có thấy đó
The dance played almost as great a role in the life of the Bushman as the story and his painting. In my experience and the experience of my ancestors, there was almost nothing which occurred in the life of the Bushman which at some point, when he had food and he had leisure, when he did not have a dance about it. He danced at birth, he danced at marriages, he danced even after death, he danced to the full moon, he danced to the game that he'd killed. And when the evening came, they began by dancing the eland dance, the dance of the animal, which was their connection with what is higher and beyond this life. I was utterly amazed how long the Bushmen would go on dancing and reenacting the various stages of the eland's life. But they said it was necessary to give them the right state of mind and the courage to plunge into the great dance. It was referred to by my ancestors as the grand dance, because there was no dance to compare with it. Anthropologists today talk about it as the trance dance. This last dance is fundamentally the most religious of all the Bushman dances. It is a dance which is devoted to healing. On this particular evening, they had brought out a man who felt very ill indeed. He was a man called Kurcha, and they laid him out near the fire, and they started the great dance around him. And inevitably in a dance so great and sacred as this dance, there were moments when the healer himself was imperiled by the great energies and forces he had released. And he had to step aside and go out into the night and stand there alone and summon up all the resources within himself to contain these overwhelming powers he had invoked. As the dance reached the climax, where the healer would massage the body of the sick person and draw out the malign spirit that was the cause of the illness, he would let out the cry of the particular animal that was associated with this form of sickness. And when this moment arrived, a strange element of compassion would come into the music, as if the Bushman healer knew what Paracelsus, the founder, the Einstein of modern medicine, proclaimed as an essential of all healing. That no healing ultimately is possible without love and without compassion. And when the healing was done, the whole attention of the dancers shifted towards the healer. He had used fatigue to eliminate all the conscious inhibitions towards the instinctive process of healing. And the danger now was that he would be trapped in this instinctive area of himself. There are Bushman paintings which show clearly how real the danger is, and the healer himself so affected by the powers that invade him that you see him bleeding by the nose. You see him in a trance-like state, overwhelmed by a new kind of danger. And he had to be nursed back by the dance and by the community. Whereas with a sick person, they had drawn the sickness out with a movement upwards of the massaging hands. Here the process is reversed. The spirit has to be pressed back into the healer. One of the extreme symptoms of the danger in which he had found himself was that he was now suffering from acute cold, and the dancers had to bring warm sand to throw over him, to bring warmth back and to restore the circulation of his blood. And the music maintained this compassionate element, without which nothing could have been accomplished of what had been accomplished that night in the heart of the Kalahari Desert.